Hello, and welcome to Glastonbury. Mr. Garrett seemed, in spite of this information, very reluctant to part from the vicar of Glastonbury. He proposed to Mr. Decker that they should stroll up Chilkwell Street together and take a glance in the darkness at Chalice House. "I'd like to know what you think, Vicar," he said in his thick, unctuous voice, "about my scheme for altering the old place. If I don't buy it, it may fall into the hands of the Papists again. And yet they've asking a fancy price. Just come and take a look, won't you, sir?" Matt Decker permitted himself to be led past the Tith Barn and up Chilwell Street. "What I had in my mind," said Mr. Garrett in a self-satisfied voice, when they had skirted the high blank wall of Chalice House and had searched the particular garden hedge beyond which lay the sacred fount, "was to build a wall here that would be worthy of the blood." He uttered the last word in a casual, matter-of-fact way, as if he had just said, "worthy of the view," or "worthy of our age." And a certain flavor of unctuous gusto in his tone was especially repellent to Matt Decker. "With an entrance, I suppose," said the latter. But it now transpired that Mr. Garrett had not considered an entrance. What he had been thinking about was guarding, protecting, defending, consecrating the blood, as he called this chalybeate spring. He had been so preoccupied in keeping sacrilege out that he had not considered how to bring devotion in. Matt Decker, as a professional priest, naturally had his flock in mind. "You won't charge an entrance fee, I hope," he went on. "Since the place has been empty, the caretaker has been taking tips, but I don't like that at all. Everybody ought to be free to drink of this water." Mr. Garrett approached the thick hedge, and extending the little bank below, he plunged his arms and his face into the early spring freshness. The hedge exhaled a delicate fragrance as he touched it, a fragrance that flowed out into the darkness on all sides. "No, no," said Bloody Johnny, stepping back into the road. "I'll have Saxon arch at a heavy door with a bell inside, a loud bell, with the rope hanging down." "Why a Saxon arch?" remarked Mr. Decker. "I don't think there were any Saxon arches. Wasn't it the Normans who—" "Brought the devil with them," cried Mr. Garrett. "And the devil's gentlemen. No, no, they're going to be one Saxon arch at any rate in Glastonbury. Our oldest character, Charter, is Saxon. Charter. Our oldest real abbots are Saxon abbots. Our oldest real kings are Saxon kings. If King Arthur comes back, as my wife's cousin says he will, he'll have to ring my Saxon bell and my Saxon wall. My own folks haven't not one drop, of gentleman's blood. I'm going to give back Chalicewell to the people, Mr. Decker." The man's hoarse voice had risen to this rich, rolling tone of rhetorical unction that the Glastonbury street corners had come to know so well before he went away to Norfolk. "Give back Chalicewell to the people," sounded over and over again in Mr. Decker's ears as the two men retraced their steps. Outside the vicarage gate, they stopped to say goodnight to each other. They instinctively turned around, as they did so, to catch a glimpse of the tall elms growing in the abbey enclosure between the boundary wall and those foundations of the chapel of King Edgar that had been discovered by supernatural aid. The new moon had long ago gone down, but the sky was clear, and over their heads stretched the long, faint, whitish trace of the Milky Way. Garrett snuffed the night air like a giant, great, sick ox that had been kept too long in its winter stall. As Matt Decker looked at him, now he kept an impression of a reserve of power, of some kind of power, that was actually startling. "This religious fair of mine," said Mr. Garrett, "will be something quite different from the Oberammerangau Passion Play. Mr. John Crow, who, by the way, is a most intelligent young man," Matt Decker smiled in the darkness at this, "with a good deal more religion than he thinks he has received so many replies from all over the world that I really think this occasion is going to be quite an important one in the history of our country." "That's just what I wanted to know, sir," said Mr. Decker. "Only I mustn't keep you now, and my son, if he has come in, will wonder where I am but I did want to know what your real inmost purpose was. Of course, if you don't care to speak of such things, I would not press you, but I'd be happier if I knew what was really in your mind. But won't you come in for a minute, Mr. Garrett? Please do. We can talk quietly in my little museum. If my son is at home, I know he'd be delighted to see you, for he has heard so much about you. Indeed, he told me he had been to tea with you. Your second daughter, she is your second, isn't she? Has been a great help to us quite often in so many ways. Do come in, Mr. Gurd. I've got to go out later to see that woman with cancer, but I told her nurse not to come for me till late, so that she would know if the poor thing was going to get any sleep tonight. Please come in now anyway. The ex-preacher of the gospel hesitated for a moment. I don't want to intrude, he murmured, but Mr. Decker swept this aside. It is really important, sir, he said emphatically, taking the other by the arm, that I should hear everything about your scheme. I may be of use to you, more use to you than you realize. Bloody Johnny permitted himself to be persuaded, and soon found himself seated in a comfortable wicker chair by a warm fire in what the father and son called their museum. The door of this chamber having been left ajar, the legatee of Canon Crow was enabled to listen to a rather singular conversation in the kitchen passage. Master Sam ain't come in, he heard the voice of Penny Pitches saying, and Weatherwax were in kitchen just now with a tale of having talked with gamekeeper's young man from West Pennard, come in for pheasant feed or something like that, and Weatherwax said I told him that a seed found Sam walking around healthy war like as the devil were after he. 'Twas Tommy Blake, the young man were, what used to live down Bear Lane, so he knew our Sam as 'twere his own kin. And ye do know, the 'twere oneself, master, what he be beyond Hardy. Whiteacre River be beyond Hardy, where this Miss Z. Zoyland do live. And so I reckon our Sam be gone to see she while she's old man be out Wiki Hole. It sounded kind of southern at that time. Just not good at that Cockney thing. He may have been walking in that direction, Penny, without going to that house. Mr. Geard uncrossed his legs and purposely made his chair creak by shifting his position in it. One of the great secrets of this man's magnetic power was that he forced himself to see nothing, to hear nothing, to think nothing of other people's affairs. Directions be shot, cried the old woman. Young men will do it, and they come to it. Directions, say ye? He'll direction her, and direct her too. Don't ye make me no mistake, master. I didn't even try that time. Well, I hope that she'll give him a good supper anyway, Penny, threw out Matt Decker with a forced smile. Don't lock the front door, Penny, when you go to bed, he went on. And will you bring me some brandy into the museum, the very best, you know? One of those bottles you hid from Weatherwax last Christmas? He returned to his guest and sat down opposite him. He too had a very creaky wicker chair, and for a little time, while Penny waited on them in sulky silence, there was nothing audible in that ramshackle room but the creaking of those two chairs under their heavy bodies. Matt Decker, his mind was away at Wet Lake Cottage. A spasm of unreasoning anger against his son kept surging up in the depths of his being, and a wild imaginary dialogue between himself and Nell Zoyland began incoherently to shape itself on the tongue of his hidden soul. She turned to me, he kept on thinking. She turned to me in her trouble. She looked at me more than at either of them. She wanted to do exactly what I told her. She said as much as that with her eyes. The dangerous hidden waters in this man's rock-rooted quintet nature began now to toss and foam and churn as he thought of Sam and his sweet adulteress. Matt Decker repeated to himself now what his old flame, Elizabeth Crow, had said, as he looked at Mr. Geard's greenish-black trousers. I believe you are in love with that girl yourself. I do remember that happening. I can remember that. A dusky flash of anger came into his ruddy cheeks as he recalled this. But if it was all nonsense, why did the thought Sam will probably sleep with her tonight cause him such singular perturbation? Perturbation? Not because of any moral distress about Sam behaving badly. Matt had absolutely nothing in him of the congenital Puritan, and his long association with birds and beasts and reptiles had given him a very natural and earthy attitude towards erotic emotion. Nor had he any particular concern about William Zoyland's feelings. He had always regarded Lord P's bastard as something of a ruffian and a bully. Secretly in his heart he was rather proud of Sam for having been able to steal away a girl's heart from a handsome rogue like that. And may it be well imagined that with all these stirrings and upheavings going on in his mind, it was very hard for Matt to give any concentrated attention to Mr. Geard in the bar rooms of the back town called Bloody Johnny's Midsummer Kick-Up. Mr. Gahn was not one to miss the preoccupation of his host, but such was his nature that it caused him no particular annoyance. He enjoyed the vicar's brandy, and kept refilling his glass and sipping its contents with a quiet relish, while he talked on and on, apparently quite as much for his own edification as for that of his abstracted hearer. His eyes, as he talked, kept wandering about the room, which is more like a playroom of a whole family of young naturalists than a theologian's study, though on one side of the apartment there was a large gloomy bookcase full of standard Anglican works. What arrested Mr. Geard's attention most was an enormous aquarium standing on a bench in the middle of the room. There was a lamp not far from this object on a table littered with magazines, and the light from this, falling on one side of the aquarium, made an illuminated segment of bright water through which some very energetic and very large minnows kept darting and hovering. These lively fish, circumscribed in a luminous void, associated themselves very vividly with what Bloody Johnny was feeling as he rambled on. Someone must make the start, he was saying, and why should not I? Like advances my leaps and bounds, and so does religion. Life does. There's no doubt that this is the moment for something drastic, for something... He hesitated for a word, while a soft motion loach, lifting its white belly from the gravel of the bottom of the aquarium, pressed an open mouth against the illuminated glass side of the vessel and fixed upon that singular prophet a cold fish-eye. For something miraculous. There are only about half a dozen reservoirs of world magic of the whole surface of the globe. Jerusalem, Rome, Mecca, Lhasa, and of these Glastonbury has the largest residue of unused power. Generations of mankind, aeons of past races, have, by their concentrated will, made Glastonbury miraculous. But since the time of that incredible fool, Henry VIII, the magic of Glastonbury has been unused. Bloody Johnny permitted his host to refill his glass. The bottle was two-thirds empty already. Here was an unexpected arrival for poor Mr. Weatherwax. The lower the liquor sank in the bottle, the less water did the visitor mix with it, and the more he drank, the more metaphysical he became. Matt Decker kept replenishing his old pipe from an earthenware jar of Craven mixture which stood between the lamp and the aquarium. There was no other source of light in this study museum beyond the fire and his own lamp, and the two men's massive physiognomies were lit up by this twofold radiation in a manner that would have delighted any connoisseur in the mystery of lines and contours, of plain surfaces and carved-out hollows. Bloody Johnny did not, apparently, make use of tobacco in any form. This is one of those nonconformist traits of his curious character that a little disconcerted his host. The brandy drinking, however, carried to such a surprising length, and producing no sign of tipsiness, was a considerable comfort to the priest's quantic-bred mind. If only the fellow had smoked too! But with these queer chaps one couldn't have everything. If the man had neither smoked or drank, the priest-naturalist would have experienced a positive physical distaste for this alien presence in his museum. He would have snuffed the air suspiciously like a hound who smells a weasel in a place of a fox. And that's where we'll end it today. Till next time, cheers from Glastonbury.